Hey there everyone, Luke here. Now before I get talking about chapter 2 of Doctor Stone, doing the backlog, so I'm doing chapter 2 today, hopefully doing chapter 3 tomorrow, but that all depends on how I'm feeling, because as we know, this week Shonen Jump is on break, so I've got no Machine Sakura to review this week, so it's like, hey, this week do Doctor Stone, do a lot of the Doctor Stone videos. But before I get into that, just want to say, go and check out again Control Chaos. I'm doing a lot of videos with the guys, doing a lot of modcasts with them, and also Fex from Control Chaos there doing the whole Twitch subathon. So if you want to see them suffer through the whole of My Hero Academia, because for anyone who's a long time Control Chaos viewer, you know how much Vex despises My Hero Academia. So gotta get to 100 subs on Twitch before they start cracking on My Hero. I'm sorry, Vex, but gotta promote that because we all like to see our content creators suffer through something that they don't particularly like. But anyway, that's besides the point. Had a lot of fun earlier doing those couple of videos that are going to be on the Control Chaos channel, so look forward to them. But for now, yeah, let's just talk about chapter 2. Alright, so chapter 2 is entitled Fantasy versus Science, which is an obvious parallel to the fact that Senku very scientifically enhanced mind and doesn't really believe in the concept of like fantasy. I don't think he believes in God pretty much pretty much in that regard. I think he believes of like everything has a rule to anything, and if it can't, and if it doesn't have a rule to it, then it's not really in his capacity to imagine that being a possibility. But also, it could be reference to the fact that the petrification device and the revival theory, that's sort of like a mystical, magical thing that can come back to life, but at the same time it can also be used of the fact that it does have rules to it. So like you can have these fantasy elements, but as long as they have rules and they can be followed by these certain rules, then it is a science, which is obviously the parallel of fantasy versus science. Now anyway, the chapter starts off pretty much like every series. Usually their second chapter gets a colour page, and it's a shame that the volumes don't include the colour pages. I mean, they do include them, but they don't include the actual colours themselves. So it's a shame we don't really get them. But hey ho, so look of the draw. But anyway, this is probably one of my favourite pages of just showing the three initial leads of the series. What starts off with them. And yeah, you can pretty much tell right from this colour page, chapter Senku forefront and centre. Yeah, main character. That is main character syndrome right there and then. So anyone who had doubts at this point, like, I wonder who the main character is, like, pretty much they're just spelling it out right there, putting Senku front and centre of the colour page. But anyway, and also as well the fact that like he's holding the revival fluid there as well, which is sort of like, okay, yeah, this is pretty much their way of like, this fantasy element, but having a mix of science to it as well. But anyway, starting off, it's quite interesting how Doctor Stone did this in the anime. How, because normally in animes, like you have enough for from chapter 1 to incorporate an entire episode, because it's usually like the length of 3 chapters. But Doctor Stone was able to get chapter 1 and chapter 2 adapted for episode 1. And I guess the reason behind that is that a lot of chapter 1 was more like of Taiji just exploring by himself before he actually got into contact with Senku. It was more to do with like the event, and there was not really much dialogue to go off on that front, which is why they were like, okay, we could sort of like get the idea of like chapter 1 and chapter 2 being combined together to make episode 1 of the anime. But anyway, so it starts off with Taiju using his immense muscles to be like, I finally brought back food for us, Senku, and Senku's just there like, Okay, yeah, you did an amazing haul here, and it seemed, and your stamina is pretty much a cheat code in games, Taiju. Again, I love just the references to video games that Senku does in the series, and another one is here where it's like going through the mushrooms and going through all of them, which is adamantium, ferrous, poisonous, white Beecham's food, and Adcera Musical and Poison, and basically saying like, look, if it's from a Mario game, it's probably poisonous, so do not eat it. That's great advice. That's great advice for anyone who's out there and looking at mushrooms, thinking like, okay, does this look like something that's from Mario? Yeah, okay, it's probably poisonous, so we shouldn't eat. And one of the most emotional moments with Senku later on in the series is again to do with Mario, where he's talking with Tsukasa, as Tsukasa's being frozen to kind of preserve him and to kind of keep him alive. And again, these videos, these backlog videos, they are gonna contain the spoilers that are further along, so you might get some spoilers from the end of the series. Particularly in this chapter, I'm going to be like giving away a major spoiler. So for anyone who hasn't read past season 2 or past the Ryusui special, don't watch these videos, because they are going to be spoiler heavy for certain events to come in the series, because that's the whole point of this. It's to do its backlog, is to look back on the series and how far it comes in, how many plot points get called back to, how many elements get repeated later on in the series. So one of the major things that I noticed when I was first watching the anime after is this part right here, where after Senku has just been like, oh, Wolfsbane, trying to kill me, and then they've all done the whole seasoning, and Taiju's like, oh, what did you season it with? And Senku's like, oh, just salt extracted from seawater, which great advice there. So like, if you ever need any salt, because oh my god, gotta tell you guys this, like my mother, whenever we've made dinner, she's just like, oh, can I have a bit of salt, even though we put salt on the dinners, and we're just like, how much more salt do you need? Like, I guess we should just go down to the sea and just get the salt from the salt water, extract it, and be like, here's your salt, mother. But anyway, so Senku's being like, oh, I've just extracted the salt from seawater. People could eat just about anything as long as it's salt. That is pretty much true, but you've got to be aware of how much salt you actually have, and it also acts as a great preservator of food. It was primeval man's great discovery, which I want to know exactly, because we know later on when we get to the Shigoman footage of when they first discover ramen, and it's just like, oh, this is the food of the gods. I would like to know what they felt like when they first discovered the idea of like, oh, taking this flavour from water and putting it in food, like how amazing that must have been for them as a society. It would probably be like just praising the gods of the sea for this basking in food cuisine for them. But anyway, Taiju is just like, oh, thank you, Senku. I don't know much of the science, but I'm gonna make up for it with my spirit and effort. As we see him running off now. There's a moment right here where in the anime you have Taiju coming across Tsukasa's statue before he actually goes for the grapes, and I really wish this was included, because it just seems like when they find Tsukasa's statue, it just seems like more of a coincidence. But and then when Taiju says it, like later on in the manga, it's just like, pretty much in chapter 3, which we're going to get to later, he says like, oh, I saw this guy before, but but the fact that we never actually saw any build up to it, that kind of was just a bit like, oh, this is a Deus Ex Machina. But the fact that we got it in the anime means like, okay, yeah, this does make sense. They were foreshadowing like this was going to be the guy that they were going to revive, later on. Yeah, I really wish that part was included, but at the same time, it doesn't really hurt the manga. It just seems like Tsukasa did pretty much, now that I think about it, come off as a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina, like, oh my god, we need someone strong to fight these lions. Oh, we got someone strong right here. That's a bit of a coincidence. Pour revive fluid on him. Yeah, it was kind of a bit of a Deus Ex Machina. Like, Pyjams, I think you have to admit that, yeah, Tsukasa in the manga was just like, really? it was that easy. So anyway, moving on, we get to the part where Taiju discovers the wild grapes, and he's just like, "Oh, can I eat them?" No, Taiju, even you should know that wild stuff usually means like, yeah, they're not gonna be good for you to eat. And sure enough, what do you know? He eats the grapes, and it's just like too sour for him. Like his face just like squirts and squints up, which, yeah, I may be picking on Taiju here, but then I'm the one who's been going. I'm the one who's been picking blackberries from a blackberry bush in the park movie. So I pretty much have no right to complain about that. But seriously, you know, wild grapes, yeah, not really the best. You should be eating that point. Although this moment right here, is despite Taiju's little bit of stupidity here, it showcases that, yeah, because it's going to come back to at the end of the chapter that he's not really as dumb as people make him out to me. I mean, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but at the same time, he's above Yo and Magma level of intelligence. So at least we can give Taiju that. But I feel like, yeah, a lot of people didn't really respond to Taiju well, because I feel like they were just like, oh, we've got this like really incredible, powerful genius here, and then we have to spend time with Taiju. I feel like Inagaki and Buichi were kind of like, I feel like the original plan was, maybe we should experiment with Taiju, but then they felt like, yeah, Taiju is just not going to cut it. But Senku, yeah, science person for our science fiction slash science realism manga, whatever you want to call Doctor Stone. I mean, yeah, it is a sci-fi, but at the same time, the science is delving in the realms of reality. Yeah, I feel like they did experiment with Taiju a little bit, but then they found like, yeah, he's not going to work as the protagonist. It's going to be definitely Senku's story. But anyway, so we get to the part where he finds the cave and pretty much goes down the same as the anime of just like, oh, what is this? Oh, there must be other survivors besides me and Senku. Which, yeah, that line, honest to God, wow. You will be amazed of just how much that actually comes back to, not just with Ichigo and Fish, but when we get to America, when we get to Treasure Island, when we get to South America, it's just amazing of just how much like they were just like hearing out as like, yeah, there are others out there, not just Taiju and Senku. And I feel like Inagaki and Buichi was suddenly hinting of like, yeah, they're not the only ones that are going to be revived. So keep this in the back of your mind before as we continue on. But again, they probably didn't really have an idea for North America initially beforehand, but at the same time, they probably had a faint idea about it. So anyway, Senku obviously brings up the fact that, no, it was me, you idiot, and Taiju just comes to the conclusion, although he is pretty much wrong here, that they're really the only people left in the world, but Senku reiterates like, no, humanity will rise again. Making that happen is their top priority. So again, showcasing that Senku is the one with the overarching goal and the mystery surrounding it and what he wants to achieve from it. But of course, he mentions like, yeah, two dudes alone currently revive humanity if he catches drift here, which is pretty obvious. Yeah, they need a woman to kind of like start repopulating humanity. And Senku starts going over the theories of like, oh, why did they break out after 3,700 years? And Taiju gets the idea of like, oh, the Stone Rider started riding Raya, which Senku concludes like, yeah, this is pretty much the reason why. But it must have been odd that since they broke up nearly at the same time, 3,700 years later, separated by only 6 months, there really must be a rational explanation behind such a coincidence. Which, there is when we get to the point with the Y-Man and why it did that. Like, it had a certain set time so that when humanity broke out, it's like, oh, we're actually immortal now. So what they'll actually be grateful. But of course, that didn't go according to Y-Man's plan, and it was just like, why aren't they rejecting humanity? Why are they rejecting immortality? Why? Just going through that question, and they and Senku says like, "Oh, we were both washed up near this cave for one." And this is where he gets like, "Oh, see that's backdroppings coming down from the ceiling, which is obviously nitric acid." And Taija just being like, "Oh my god, nitric acid! That's so amazing." You have no idea what that is, Taiju. No, just having that moment of just like, "Oh yeah, I totally get what you're talking about." Do you really? Nope. Okay, that's a pretty funny moment, funny exchange from them. And Seiku's just like, "Yeah, I thought so, you big oaf, that you wouldn't kind of know that." And I'm not going to explain it in detail because for me to explain it to you in detail, that is kind of impossible and it's going to be a pain in the ass for me. So I won't. And this is where we get Senku experimenting, and Taija just, "Oh, so you pour some of the miracle nitric acid on someone, and the stone rots away." And Senku's like, "Oh, if only it was that simple." Yeah, science is never simple in this series. It's always about trial and error and back-breaking pain, as we're gonna soon see when we get from reviving someone to building a goddamn spaceship to space. So Senku continues on and says like, "Oh, I've already tried this crazy number of times with different methods and different..." So basically being like, "Yeah, I've tried to find something time and time again with different methods, just trying to wrap my head around about it over and over again." But he's in the realm of the fantastic here. Again, this is probably a reference to the title of like fantasy versus science. He's just trying to figure out all the theories and all the fantastical what's the word I'm looking for, hypothesis is that was the word, to try and work out like how exactly I can break someone out of the stone here, and go through and through on that, and keeping their cells intact and everything. And obviously Senku likes the proper experiments to run, proper equipment to run proper experiments, because in this world he doesn't have at this point iron, glass, or even sulfuric acid yet, so he's absolutely to the bare basics and bare minimum. And Taiju's just getting on the idea of like, "Oh, so there is something that science can't explain," but Senku just immediately drops that idea right then and then, and basically calls it a cliche of just like, "Oh, just because I can't figure it out means that it's obviously something that science can't explain." But Senku's just like, "Really, that's the cliche line you're going off with here?" Because the way we form, this is why we form hypotheses and perform experiments. Science demands diligence. So yeah, just trying again and again and again until you figure out like, okay, that's how it's going to work. Which is the same with anything really. Like if you're just like experimenting around with things, not just in science, but say for example in film or media, like you're just experimenting with your own style and techniques until you work out something that works for you. Or like for example with what we're doing with the drama group now with the Tempest, we're going to be experimenting around, seeing how things are different and how it's going to work for our performance and our interpretation of the Tempest. And that's basically again getting down to a science, pretty much just the science of just like how the audience are gonna, because it's a Shakespeare and Shakespeare is kind of hard these days to get people invested, so you gotta work around with all different experiments of being diligent about it and figuring out like, okay, this is not gonna work, but maybe try it this way. And as long as you follow the rules and everything and the steps that you have in place, it can basically turn into something amazing. And that's what science is all about at the end of the day. And the main important theme of Dr. Stone is, so you can follow the rules but have diligence and patience, science can perform anything. And Senku says like, "Oh, if only I had some booze and we could combine the alcohol and the ethanol with the nitric acid to basically a liquid known as nidal, which is an industrial strength corrosive agent." So basically like, okay, we're going to get nitric acid plus alcohol to create nidal, a corrosive substance. And this is where Taija gets his brilliant like, "Oh my god, I know what alcohol is made from. Wine is a type of alcohol. Wine comes from grapes, and yeah, we can make them because I've got these grapes here." And this is where Senku's just like, "Oh my god, Taiju is much more clever than I thought, because he actually does acknowledge that. He's like, yeah, excellent work, you big oaf. So Taiju may not be the sharpest tool in his head, but at least he can process the bare basics and the bare minimum of what he actually knows, and he knows, like, yeah, wine comes from grapes. I've got grapes here, so we can make wine, which is a type of alcohol, so that can actually work. And Senku has no qualms with that. So yeah, Taiju, probably your sharpest moment in the series. Yeah, get used to that. This is probably the smartest moment that Taiju's ever going to have in the series. Well, I say that, but then I've just remembered, oh wait, he's the one that actually brings Senku back to life after Tsukasa kills him. So yeah, okay, one of two moments, but they're all in this arc. I can, well, maybe not in this arc, like, either way, all in this part, like, he has two bright moments, but they're the only two bright moments that potentially he has throughout the rest of the series. Or, I mean, I guess you could count the cell phone when he works out, like, oh, there's a cell phone at Senku's grave. But anyway, that's besides the point. Bottom line is, Taiju is way smart. It's more, well, I shouldn't say way. He's more smarter than he actually lets on at times. So yeah, and really one of the funniest moments here, where Senku's just there, like, just trying to crush the grapes, like, this is going to take forever. And then Taju's there, like, with his feet just, and Senku's just, oh yeah, I'll let you deal with the grunt work from now on. As we see that some time has passed, which is 3 weeks, and they finally got the wine to a problem substance that they can actually use. Now, one of the moments here that I really wish was included in the manga is, in the anime, they either talk like, is it okay for us to drink? I mean, we're technically underage, and then Senku's like, no, we're over 3,700 years old, so it's alright, and the Taju's like, yeah, I guess you're right, and they just start drinking it right then and there. So yeah, don't go drinking on, don't have underage drinking, kids, but at the same time, if you've been petrified in stone and you're 3,700 years old, you can bend the rules in that way. But oh my god, Senku's face there, yeah, get to the good looking Senku. So yeah, and obviously we get different reactions, like Taiju not the biggest fan of alcohol. Homemade alcohol, so homemade wine from grapes. Yeah, he's not the biggest fan of it, but Senku obviously can handle his liquor a lot more than most people. Like, he can handle his liquor a lot more than Motsukase, so I guess that's something he can one up on one of the members of the power team. Like, yeah, you may be stronger than me physically, but at least I can hold my liquor. So anyway, and also as well, yeah, they give the instruction of how to make wine from grapes, but seriously, any kids reading Nutstone, don't go and try doing that until you literally have the proper procedures in place to actually do that. So anyway, Senku goes, yeah, step by step, diligently. The next part is going to be a little more tedious, an introduction to distilling wine into brandy, and of course Taiju being like, I don't get what distilling means, and Senku's like, oh, I thought as much, but and this is something that he goes on to explain. By heating, cooling, and letting the wine condense, we raise the relevant alcohol contents. And he's like, and he gets his big shoulder moment here, but it's like, behold, even the micromesopotamorisms, I butchered that word, civilization of 3000 BC created creminids like this. Nothing left to do now but get excited, and the series is just like, yeah, you think you're gonna have your big shonen moment here, Senku? Not today. And the clay pot that he was using to make the alcohol into brandy just explodes in front of him, and he's just like, ugh, fine. Guess I've got to start again from the beginning. As we start to get into a time lapse of a year going by, as Senku says at the end of the chapter, and at the end of episode 1. So this whole montage is just like a year going by as we see Taiju growing a beard. Kind of like what I have right now. I mean, don't worry, I'm gonna shave it off. I'm gonna shave it off either tomorrow/today, because it is the morning. It is like in the dead of morning, so I'm probably going to shave it off later before the next chapter. But yeah, it's kind of like got it going here, like Taiju has, and obviously we don't get this in the anime of Taiju just freaking out that Yuzuri is gonna hate his beard, and he's probably just gonna have to do something about it. But and Senku sets him up by using these she showers, but of course using the showers just makes his face go all puffy like this and all red, which makes Senku just laugh his ass off. Now, say what you will about Senku, people said, like, I think Shonen Oji said this. Yeah, Shonen Oji did say this of Senku being a stoic character until the Byakuya bit, but not really stoic here when he's laughing his ass off at Taiju. So yeah, he does have emotions, Senku. Like he can laugh pretty clearly here. He's not really just like I'm not just the brainy smart guy who's just like a stickler for the rules. No, he can actually see the funny side of situations when it needs to, as it demonstrated right here with Taiju. And of course, after the year passes, we're able to get the revival fluid flowing properly, and this is all before Platinum. This actually does come back in the end of South America in the new Stone World, where Suika takes over as the main protagonist for that little mini arc there. And Senku, obviously, because he's smarter than Suika at that point, is able to get it more to go in his favor over just a year, whereas Suika, it took her. Now we finally found out how long Suika was actually petrified. She was petrified for 2 years, so she was on her own for 5 years in South America. I think I said this in the last chapter, but my God, Inagaki really loved the number 5 in Doctor Stone. Right, so yeah, Suika was on her own for 5 years. So she was 12 when she got petrified, so 5 years. So she was 17 when Senku actually awoke from the petrification. This is the point where I'm actually going to get back to, because now that we've got to this point where Senku's explaining, let this be a lesson, you big oaf. It's not that some things that there's some things that even science can't explain. Rather, research for rules and principles behind the inescapable, and apply good old diligence and effort, and that's what science really is. So yeah, basically saying, like, as long as you follow the rules, practice, science can accomplish anything, and you can figure out how to actually do something, which definitely comes back into play with New Stone World and Suika just going diligently time and time again. After years and years of failure, she finally got it, because she worked out how everything works, from reading and studying and putting in the effort and putting in the patience despite how long it actually took. And of course, the bird that they were experimenting on is able to revive. And Senku, says, we've started experimenting a year ago. This must be trial number 100 and something, which I can only imagine what it was like for Suika. Probably like trial 500 or something like that. And it happened sooner than he thought, which is pretty much what he says in New Stone World when Suika actually finds it. It's like, oh, you were quicker than I thought. It went by quicker than I thought. And he wraps up the chapter by saying, we could triumph over the fantastic with the power of science. Again, referencing fantasy versus science and telling us to get excited. And this is where, again, Senku, despite how much of a cynical bastard he can be at times, he knows when to give credit where credit is due. And the fact that Taiju was the one who came up with the grapes and came up with the idea of, like, oh, using the grapes to make the alcohol to get this Naito, he says, Taiju, this was your idea. I am grateful for it. So you get to decide who we revive first, and obviously it's going to be Yuzuriya. And yeah, that's where the chapter ends. And yeah, we get that moment from the episode. So we get that moment from the episode that I thought was cut at the end, where we go, underage drinking at over 37 years old. I think I'm good. So yeah, we got that at the end in between the chapters, the little bookend chapter. Now going back to that whole ending of the chapter, I feel like Senku, after Suika revived him, he was like, look, Suika, you did so well, and you put in 100%, like 150% or 10 billion% to get this revival fluid going. And even though it took you years and years to get going, you were able to follow the steps, able to revive me, and I'm grateful for that. So the first person we're going to revive is your choice. And obviously she chooses Kohaku, and I like that, the fact that you can obviously pinpoint most of chapter 2 here with the whole experimenting and failing and rebuilding and even succeeding in the end. You can obviously apply most of that to Sarika in New Stone World, which was kind of like a soft reset of the series because it was basically one person reviving and going through the experiments that Senku had to do at the beginning of the series, and obviously failing at them as well, and doing their best to succeed and follow the rules that Senku had set up for them, and passing it on to the next generation, which obviously allowed her and Chrome to come up with the idea of the return rocket. Now, obviously, like I said, pretty much next chapter we get introduced to Sakasa, and I'm glad we had that moment in the anime, which was skipped over in this chapter because, again, like I said, Tsukasa does come off as a bit of a Deus Ex Machina at the beginning of the series when you really think about it. But anyway, guys, look forward to that. Look forward to that when I get to chapter 3, which will either be tomorrow or next day, not decided yet. But what did you think of this chapter? Let me know. Like, subscribe, comment, all that jazz. And this will be Lasherluke signing off. Later, guys.